our second episode of Talkin CRM. Today, it's my pleasure to invite back Steve Bernstein, a colleague of mine from the Sapmetrics days and founder of Waypoint Group's Top Box. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I think what everybody wants to know in this time is quite simply, how do you keep the customers you already have? And I know that's what you've specialized in for many years. And I think the audience out there would like to hear maybe one or two quick wins or imperatives to keep closer to their customers during this time of change.
Yeah, thanks for that question. The most important thing that we find with keeping customers, especially in this time, right? I mean, now more than ever, everybody always says, but with the change that has happened here with COVID, with all of the implications on that, we know that business as usual isn't, right? Things have changed. If you are continuing to do business with your customers as you always did, chances are you're going to be missing some customer expectations. And whether it's COVID or whether it's some other, customer specific situation that you have, maybe mergers and acquisitions, maybe it's a customer is facing financial difficulty, maybe there's some other emergency that happens. I mean, there's always things going on with your customers. The better you can listen and understand what's going on with your customers, the more likely you are, of course, to be able to retain and expand them, make them successful. So, the opportunity to listen should never be thought of as just kind of a survey. It should be an opportunity to really engage the customer with the right people at the right time, asking the right questions, get some insight, take some action on it, show that you care, right? And the more you can do that, the better you're going to have your gross retention and net retention metrics obviously met.
Well, I think those sound like the right things to do, but companies still don't get around to engaging their customers, and we hear this all the time. What are some of the things that you fear that companies aren't doing that they should be doing today, maybe at a more accelerated rate?
There's two problems that we generally see. One is that things are very outside in, and some evidence of that is, sorry, I said that backwards. Two things that we see, right? The first is very inside out, right? That, as an example, maybe you want customer feedback, but you kind of do it as an annual NPS survey. That works well for you as a vendor, but that doesn't work well for your customers. There's no what's in it for me. They don't know why they're giving you this kind of gift of their feedback. It goes into a black hole. And so you get really low response rates as a result. So the whole opportunity, we think, is to have the right cadence of working with customers on an ongoing basis. It doesn't have to be difficult, it doesn't have to be resource consuming, but it does have to be deliberate and thought through. So if you're looking at, say, during the implementation and onboarding, time to first value, before renewal, right? Maybe after renewal, and then moving into the second year, there are these various kind of points across the customer life cycle where their perspectives, their requirements, their expectations of your customers, they change along that life cycle. And if you're not looking at that feedback and keeping those customers engaged across that life cycle, then you're missing out on the big opportunity to strengthen those relationships. You're going to leave the customer to their own devices. They're going to have to figure it out. Maybe you have check-in calls. How are things going? That's not the right kind of questioning. And it's not going to give you anything insightful, especially doesn't work at scale.
If they know they have maybe an underperforming program, what's the one thing they should do today to start to make this more insightful?
I think, first of all, I would say do away with the check-in call because it's useless, right? There's nothing valuable to you and to the customer. Do instead put together with your customer what we call a joint success plan. Again, don't overthink it. It's basically what's the outcome you're looking at, what are the key requirements to get there, the key requirements from the vendor, and the key requirements from the customer. There are always both sides of things. if there's just sort of a meeting of the mind during that implementation process and the onboarding process of what are we trying to achieve, what are the action items, then you don't need the check-in call, because your check-in calls basically become a project status. But the other thing you really need is just a way to monitor and measure what's working and not working. It's not enough to just have the plan. So measure and monitor across that customer life cycle some really clear types of things. What do they think about your ability to contribute to their success? What do they think about the way you're managing the relationship with their company or account? What do they think about the value they're receiving? Those kinds of questions really make it easy to refine your success plan over time, make it easy to do this at scale, and makes it easy to keep the customer engaged.
And that's one of the main questions I receive from business leaders about their CX programs. They're saying, oh, it's one score, or it's one data point. But for a B2B program that is really looking to understand and react quickly to customer needs, it's not about a score.
Right. I mean, there's a whole lot to unpack in what you just said, but I couldn't agree more that the score really doesn't tell you anything of any interest. It's the context of the score that gives you something interesting. So, for example, a score for an account compared to other accounts like it could be very telling, right? This account is really happy compared to other accounts like it. Why? What's working well in this account? What are we doing in this account? What are some of those bright spots, those best practices that we can replicate to other accounts? Because maybe you've got one CSM that has adopted just a certain style or process or even a tool. What is that, and how do we uncover and make that apply to other accounts like it? Another example of the score is, maybe you're getting feedback at point A, which would be like right at onboarding. Point B might be, well, after 3 months later, we expected some value by now, right? So the score in the context of that journey, did the score improve or decline, right? Are we headed in the right direction or not? And then to get this whole importance bit of what's working and what's not working, and getting the customer to just quantify that, gives you the opportunity to really clearly understand where you need to focus. So what we've been doing at Waypoint for the last 12 years since we founded the company was really focusing on what are those differences in B2B. What do companies need to do to make this kind of customer engagement and strengthen and stronger customer relationships? And the learnings that we've put into this are in a different tool. It's called Topbox, but it's based on the B2B specific methodology of understanding account sentiment and working account relationships.
Yeah, and these tools are amazing time savers. It's the difference between having a team crunch numbers, gather data, do data cleansing, and having something that's piped in, right? Either from a survey, or CX tool, or coming in directly from a CDP.
Yes,
it's exciting.
Right.
It's in terms of data visualization.
Yeah. I mean, your Salesforce system, your CRM. I mean, I'm just scratching at the surface of what I know with CRM. I know you've got a lot of expertise there, but do you find companies have clean CRM data? Do they know who the right contacts are in these accounts? Is there some exercise there?
Now, this actually brings up a very interesting question that literally just came up in the last day. A marketing and nurturing program, okay, for big high value accounts. It turns out they need a lot of first party data to be able to make those marketing actions as effective as they can be. So, the questions we're asking are, do you have a CX program? Do you understand the account hierarchy within these 20 or 30 very large enterprise accounts? And so, what we see is kind of a lack of cross-pollination, or an opportunity for marketing and sales and the group in charge of CX and account management to really start to democratize this data for, the good of all parties.
Right. Yeah, it takes a partnership. I mean, I think our most successful clients are those that where marketing comes to the table with the customer success organization. If we can get sales there, all the better, right? Because that's sales to CS handoff, and the expansion opportunities are a big part of this. But marketing needs to play a key role, especially now that there's this mantra, I guess, of customer marketing. What should they be marketing to customers? Well, what are the pain points that customers are having? What are the best practices that customers need to be adopting? That varies by different types of accounts, by even individual accounts, right? So you can be way more targeted with your messaging and your customer engagement when you really have sentiment and a clear idea of what's working and not working, right? But it all starts with good, CRM data, in the sense of at least knowing who the right contacts are that you're trying to engage.
And that brings me to another question. Steve, in the CX2C video, we talk a lot about different types of scores. We talk about customer effort, CSAT, NPS, and something that I like to call the turkey sandwich score. And the joke about that really is from an old business associate that was building a CX program, and they were looking to see which metrics resonated the most or proved out to be more predictive of account growth and loyalty and value. And in his view, it didn't matter. And the joke was, well, we could ask somebody if they would recommend a turkey sandwich to their friends or customers, as long as that score and those results did correlate with your most satisfied in growing loyal customers. And if they responded to the turkey sandwich score, great. Of course, we're making a joke, but what do you feel is sort of the most effective mix of metrics and processes for these programs?
Yeah, I love in that CX2C video that you put together, was a fabulous primer on customer experience and kind of taking somebody through the end-to-end process in a really engaging and entertaining way. So kudos to you for a great video. I would also say, though, that what we found in our research with B2B for the last 12 years, we've genuinely seen the metric, what you're actually measuring at the overall sentiment level really matters less than, are they engaged? Are they giving you feedback or not? And totally makes sense, right? There was this common discussion many years ago about, like, well, we got a 10% response rate, and we think that this represents our customer base, right? Because those people that didn't respond they're not any more or less likely to be happy or unhappy, and that kind of thinking is just not accurate. What the truth is that people will respond if there's something in it for them, right? And if you're sending over sort of that blanket invitation that says, your feedback is important to us, please take 2 minutes to tell us, right? There's no what's in it for me. But if you have a commitment to follow up and address what they're telling you, you can't always just do it, but you should be able to address it in some way. And the more you can do that, the better your response rates are. And we know that accounts that respond are up to 14 times more likely to be retained than accounts that don't respond. So if your top level sentiment question is CSAT or effort score or the recommend score or likely to renew or any of the myriad of methodologies out there, really, what matters most is that you're listening and that you're taking action. And when you can demonstrate that, you get super high participation rates, response rates, and you get a great predictor of which accounts are most likely to churn, right? Knowing that the account A, who's silent, is 14 times more likely to churn than account B, who's giving you feedback, that's actionable, right? You can pull in some big guns, right? Maybe do executive conversations. Maybe there's some other ways that you can tune the messaging. Maybe there's some other, kind of process you can put in place. The prescriptive, though, is just knowing where to start, right? Know where to focus.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you referenced the CX2C video, kind of tongue-in-cheek there. But there's one case study that's a little bit of CRM, a little bit of CX. It's the Lafarge cement study. Yeah. I love it because it's cement.
Right.
Develop a customer experience around cement.
Right.
Well, it turns out you can. If you have different customers have different needs in terms of shipping and packaging and discounts, it's really understanding those customer needs and being nimble enough to access that information and have to act on it.
True. I love that example, and I tell everybody to go watch that video. It's a great case story in the CX2C video about that cement company. And you know, one of the things that we've really learned very, very clearly, we've done so many different types of A/B testing and looking at what drives response rates. The number of questions really does not impact response rates. It might impact the completion rate, right? But think about it, right? If you're communicating to somebody, hey, this thing is going to take no more than 2 minutes to respond or to fill out. If you see somebody click and then they don't fill out, right? It's not about response rate. It's about they don't care, because you've already set the expectation. It's only 2 minutes. So what would make them care to fill it out? What would make them want to give you the gift of their feedback? Well, duh, right? If they're going to give you feedback, you better follow up on it. But asking a few more questions, totally legit, totally should do, because you don't get quantifiable information, right, unless you ask a few more questions. Now, you'll never get to root cause in a survey, so don't make those 90-question surveys that take a half an hour. 2 to 3 minute target, you can still ask a lot of questions, especially if your questionnaires are persona-based. Don't ask a decision maker questions about support, for example. They're not calling in. Don't ask an end user about value for price. They don't know, right? But those kinds of things can be tweaked in the questionnaire so you can get the kind of fidelity you need.
Well, Steve, you've been a wonderful guest in these conversations. I always learn something about engaging with business customers. So I have one final question for you. In this day and age, they want to understand what a cutting edge CX B2B program will look like maybe in 5 or 10 years from now. Wonder if you can give us a little bit of peek into the future.
Yeah. What did you eat? Yeah. The cutting edge, I would say, is sort of empathy and really listening and really trying to form those partnerships. Now, you have to work out how to do that at scale. Your most strategic accounts, I would recommend always start there, because that's where the money is. That's where you can actually perfect your processes in a high touch way. Then you can work out, well, how am I going to scale these down to the longer tail, right? So once you really work out some of these practices that you want to implement, you got them developed. Now you can develop the playbooks and the automation, right, for the long tail. That would be the kind of the way I start. But focus on strengthening relationships with all of the contacts that matter. In other words, all of the contacts that have some influence. And many times that may be everybody in the account, maybe not, kind of depends on your industry, but you want everybody that knows about you as a vendor, you want them to think that, you want them to be a promoter, right? You want them to be an advocate for you. That's the way you accelerate profitable growth. So hopefully over time, we'll have better CRM data coming through. We'll make this will get easier and easier as companies start to refine their practices and working with individual accounts. We see all the time within our customer base 80% plus response rates. I mean, right? 5 to 10% response rate, A, is not representative of the business, and B, there's no way to slice and dice it, because it'll get way too thin too quickly. So if it doesn't represent your business, it's going to be hard to action and hard to make any sense out of.
That's great advice, and it's great to have that reference point. Steve, you've been a wonderful guest, as always. I only have one more question for you, and this comes in keeping with the theme of the show in classic horror, but I want you to recommend your go-to classic horror for all the kids out there.
My go-to classic horror. Well, for the kids out there, Cabin in the Woods was pretty fun, wasn't it? Right? But yeah, that was pretty fun. Actually, in terms of horror though, what was the one with Samara coming out of the TV?
Oh, that was The Ring.
The Ring, right?
That was scary.
That was a good one.
That's a good one. That's reaching way back, as always. Right. Steve, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for coming on Talkin CRM.
Thanks for having me. Take care.